When I picked up the phone to ask my son Max when his wedding would be, my daughter-in-law Lena looked me right in the eye and said with a chilling smile, "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited special people." The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. Special people. I kept breathing, but the room tipped, as if the floor had decided I did not belong on it anymore. For 3 years I had covered a monthly rent of $500, furnished their rooms piece by piece, and stocked a refrigerator whenever shelves went bare. In that ledger of quiet rescues, I learned something brutal about myself. I was not on their list of special people. I stood in my own living room holding the phone like a weight and watched my boys stare past me. The pale pink dress I had chosen for the ceremony waited in the dark of my closet beside new shoes and a hope that felt foolish now. I had spent $200 imagining a place in my son's photographs, a small smile in a corner of joy. Those imagined pictures were already sealed without me, as if I had never existed in their frame. For weeks I had rehearsed tiny kindnesses. I had set aside $1,000 as a gift, called my sister Caroline in Boston with the happy news, and scrubbed every corner of the house in case they stopped by to celebrate. All of that careful tenderness collapsed at once under 4 sour words that burned a hole through everything I had prepared. Only special people. My son finally lifted his eyes and recited something small and neat about an intimate ceremony with only witnesses. I knew better. I had seen the photographs online, her parents proud and centered, her brothers raising glasses under bright lights. The circle had been full without me, tight as a fist that knew exactly whom to keep out. Her white dress glowed in those pictures. The same gown eased into existence with the $800 I had pressed into her hand last month for personal expenses. I saw everything I was not supposed to see, every smile arranged as proof of belonging. A week later to the day, my phone rang with a voice I barely recognized, a voice stripped of triumph and lacquered with fear. The woman who had swept past me at her own wedding sounded small now. She said the rent was overdue, the landlord was circling, and that I had forgotten to send the transfer. Her steadiness broke at the edges, like ice in warm water. I sat inside the pause that followed and counted the times I had hurried to the bank so 2 adults could sleep without worry. I remembered canceled lunches and rescheduled appointments so their roof would hold. I remembered dinners stretched with beans and rice while I pressed money into their plans. I remembered how quickly gratitude evaporated when the favor was done. After they cut me from the single day that should have included me, they called as if nothing in the world had shifted under our feet. I answered with a calm that surprised me. I told her I had already explained I only helped those I considered special. Silence deepened on the line until I could hear my own pulse knocking in my ear. For the first time in years, it was not my hands that shook. She faltered, saying they had always been special to me, that I had felt like a second mother. I knew the texture of that tone. It was the voice reserved for withdrawals, the soft music played when a door to my savings needed to open. It had carried requests for a dress, for a trip, for rings I had unknowingly financed without witnessing the moment they were placed. For so long I had stepped lightly, measuring words and gifts, hoping to purchase a scrap of tenderness from my own child. I had been the model helper, the accommodating in-law, the silent provider who swallowed her vanishing. But the phrase, "only special people," struck a sleeping place in me. I began to tally the outflow with the habit of a bookkeeper and the ache of a widow. 3 years of rent and food and emergencies and whims added beyond $20,000 before I could even reach the bottom of the page. That money came from my retirement, from the quiet pile I had built, from the careful legacy my late husband left so I might grow old without fear. I asked myself what it bought. Not a chair at a table where vows were spoken, not a hug in a doorway, not even a courtesy call. It bought an emptiness, the kind that echoes louder when you finally name it. Night found me sitting on the edge of the bed, the phone face down, the house more silent than usual. The numbers would not stop marching through my head, turning into months and sacrifices and errands that blurred together. Every item on that list wore my handwriting. Every line was another way I had tried to be useful, visible, forgivable, indispensable to people who preferred my wallet to my company. I thought about the dress again, the soft pink now a little cruel. I pictured my sister's face when I had called her from Boston with plans that felt certain then. I saw my own hands polishing the table, as if readiness could summon an invitation. The shame that followed those memories had heat to it, a heat that did not fade with air or time. When the heat cooled, a steadier feeling remained. It was not rage in the wild sense. It was colder and more exact, like a hand turning a key to lock a door after finally learning what comes in uninvited. Somewhere in that stillness, I understood I had been financing a story that did not include me and calling it love so I would not have to call it loss. I did not perform any speeches. I did not stage any scenes. I simply let the truth stand where I could not ignore it. I had traded years of ease for two people who could not bother to include me for a single hour. That is the sort of math that does not lie, even when you wish it would. It sits there, heavy, until you stop pretending. The tears came eventually, but they carried a different weight than before. They did not beg or bargain. They did not ask for a better past. They moved like something being washed clean. When they were done, the shape of my life looked sharper, less crowded by excuses I had been repeating to keep the peace that never protected me. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of anger, of accumulated frustration, of years of silently endured humiliation. Each tear carried the weight of swallowed words and quiet disappointments. I wept for every moment. They made me believe that my love was too heavy to carry, that my presence was a nuisance, that money was the only bridge left between us. I mourned the woman who had vanished behind endless giving, the mother who mistook sacrifice for affection. When morning arrived, the air in my room felt sharper, like something had shifted inside me overnight. The ache was still there, but it no longer felt warm. It was colder, more deliberate. I walked to the mirror in the bathroom and studied the face that looked back. The same weary eyes, the same lines mapping years of devotion without return. But beneath that familiar reflection, I saw something else, an edge of steel that had finally risen to the surface. For the first time in decades, I felt a pulse of resolve, faint but real. I went to the kitchen and brewed coffee the same way I had every morning for 40 years. Only this time, I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't wait for a message from Michael saying he was sorry or that everything had been a misunderstanding. I sat down with my cup, and for once, I wasn't thinking about him at all. I was thinking about me. That table had witnessed everything: birthday surprises planned with love, checks written in haste, quiet tears wiped away before anyone could see. But now, it would bear witness to something new. I brought out my checkbook, old bank statements, and a pen. My hands trembled as I began adding the numbers that had silently drained my life. I needed to face the truth in ink and paper, to know the full price of my blind devotion. $500 a month for rent. Over 3 years, that was $18,000. Groceries and household items came to another $7,200. Gifts for birthdays, holidays, anniversaries, $3,000 at least. Medical help when Hannah got sick, $800. A car loan never repaid, $2,500. An air conditioner repair, $600. Furniture for their living room, $1,200. $33,400 in total. $33,400 I had poured out from my late husband's savings, from my pension, from the careful nest egg I had built penny by penny. All of it spent to keep two grown adults, comfortable people who couldn't even look me in the eye when they betrayed me. I stared at the number until it blurred, the ink swimming on the page like another kind of tear. The phone rang, slicing through the silence. Michael's name flashed on the screen. My heart, once so easily stirred, stayed steady. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then it stopped. I lifted my cup and took another sip. 10 minutes later, it rang again. This time it was Hannah. I let it ring too. Then came a message. "Mom, please answer, we need to talk." I deleted it without hesitation. By 2 in the afternoon, the walls of the house felt too close. I slipped on my shoes and went for a walk. Not to run errands, not to the grocery store or the pharmacy or the bank. Just a walk, for no one but myself. The sun was soft, the air cool. I passed the park where I used to take Michael as a little boy, where he once clung to my neck and told me I was the best mom in the world. I wondered when that boy had disappeared, replaced by a man who saw me only as a source of funds. When did I start believing that love could be bought? When did I begin paying for affection I should have received freely? The questions chased one another as I reached the familiar steps of the bank. I paused outside, looking through the glass at the manager, Mr. Graham. He smiled and waved, recognizing me. He had handled every one of my transfers to Michael and Hannah for years. He had watched my balance sink month after month, his eyes kind but silent. I stepped inside and walked straight to his office. The air smelled faintly of paper and polished wood, a smell I had always associated with duty. "Mr. Graham," I said quietly, "I need to cancel all the automatic transfers I have set up." His eyebrows lifted in surprise, the way someone looks when they realize a long story has just reached its ending. For 3 years, those transfers had arrived as faithfully as sunrise. Every month, without fail, money left my account like clockwork. Mr. Graham, the bank manager, looked at me over his glasses and asked if I was certain. Had something happened? His tone carried genuine concern, the kind that had been missing from my son's voice for a long time. "What happened," I told him, "is that I finally opened my eyes. I want everything canceled, and I want to make sure no one can ever touch my accounts again." While he typed, my phone trembled on the desk. First Michael, then Hannah, then Michael again. Their timing was uncanny, as if they could sense the moment their supply line was being severed. I turned the phone off and slipped it into my purse, silencing the noise that had controlled me for years. When Mr. Graham handed me the paperwork, he hesitated. "I hope you don't mind me saying this," he said softly. "I've watched you be very generous with your family. I just want to be sure you're not being pressured into this." His words hit me in a place I hadn't known was still tender. This man, who only knew me through deposits and withdrawals, was showing more care than my own son. I smiled faintly. "No, Mr. Graham, I'm not being pressured. I've simply stopped pressuring myself." The relief I felt as I signed those forms was indescribable. For the first time in years, my money was truly mine again. Mine to protect, mine to spend, mine to keep without guilt. When I walked out of the bank, I felt lighter, as though I had left a heavy coat behind. For years I had dragged around invisible obligations, wearing them like proof of love. Now, every step home felt like reclaiming a small piece of myself. I thought of all the things I hadn't done because of them, the trips I'd postponed, the dinners I'd turned down, the hobbies I'd quietly buried. Each memory was a small ghost of the life I might have lived. I had stopped painting because Hannah needed new curtains. I skipped a cruise with old friends because Michael's car payment was due. I learned to shrink my own joys to make room for theirs. That day, walking home under the mild winter sun, I promised myself that part of my life was over. No more replacing my needs with their emergencies. No more confusing generosity with servitude. When I reached my street, something felt wrong before I even saw it. 3 cars were parked out front. Michael's, Hannah's, and one I didn't recognize. Through the window, I saw movement inside my house. My chest tightened. They still had keys. I had given them keys because I thought one day they might use them to check on me, to protect me, not to invade my home. I stood for a moment on the porch, the key cold in my palm, trying to steady the tremor in my hands. This would be the first true test of the woman I had become overnight. No pleading, no bending. Just the truth, plain and unmoved. I opened the door and walked into a scene that felt like a betrayal made flesh. Michael sat slumped on my couch, his face buried in his hands. Hannah paced the living room like a cornered animal, restless and angry. And a man I didn't know, older, gray-suited, professional, was rifling through papers spread across my dining table. My papers. My private documents. For a heartbeat, none of them moved. It was as though I had interrupted a crime in progress. "What is going on here?" I asked, my voice louder than I expected. All 3 turned toward me, startled, as if I were the intruder in my own home. Hannah spoke first, her voice dripping with that polished panic she used when she wanted control. "Margaret, thank goodness you're here. We were just trying to help. This is Mr. Fisher from the law firm. We needed to talk about your situation." "My situation," I repeated, calm but sharp. "What situation?" "I'm perfectly fine." Michael finally lifted his head, and the look in his eyes was a mixture of guilt and desperation. "Mom, we went to the bank. They told us you canceled the transfers. Mr. Graham said you even blocked our access to your accounts. Why would you do that?" Mr. Fisher stepped forward, extending his hand with a practiced smile that never reached his eyes. "Mrs. Parker," he said smoothly, "I'm an attorney specializing in family law. Your children are worried about you. They asked me to assess your mental well-being." I didn't take his hand. Instead, I walked straight to the table and gathered my scattered papers into a neat pile. "These are private. You have no right to be reading them." "Mom," Michael said, using that patronizing tone that had become second nature to him, "we're concerned. You've been acting irrationally, cutting us off, ignoring calls. We just want to make sure you're okay." Hannah stepped closer, her voice soft, syrupy, manipulative. "Margaret, honey, we know you've been under a lot of stress. Maybe the loneliness is starting to weigh on you more than you realize." Their words fell into the room like poison dressed as kindness. I had heard this tone before, the one people used when they wanted to make you doubt your own mind. But this time, something inside me stayed steady. I saw them clearly now, not as family, not as victims, but as people afraid of losing control over the hand that had always fed them. I took a slow breath and looked at both of them, realizing that this, finally, was the confrontation I had been preparing for all along. At your age, episodes of confusion are normal. The word confusion echoed through my mind like a warning bell. In that instant, I saw everything clearly. The lawyer wasn't there to help. He was there to build a case, to turn me into a fragile, unreliable old woman, unfit to manage her own life. The same woman who once told me that only special people were welcome at her wedding was now painting me as a senile fool. I felt something rise inside me, cold and sharp. "I am not confused," I said, my voice steady enough to freeze the room. "I have never seen things more clearly, and you are all going to leave my house right now." Mr. Fisher adjusted his tie, using the calm tone of professionals who believe patience makes them sound in control. "Mrs. Parker," he said, "I understand that you feel upset, but your children have the right to step in if they think your financial judgment has been impaired. They have documented certain behaviors that concern them. Concerned behaviors." I laughed, a dry, cracking sound that came from somewhere deep, too brittle to be gentle. "Concerned? About what? That I finally decided my money belongs to me? That I stopped supporting two adults who treat me like a stranger?" The words spilled before I could stop them, hot and alive. Hannah flinched as if struck. "We never treated you badly," she cried. "You are part of our family. Everything you own will come to us one day anyway. We're just making things easier." There it was, the truth stripped bare. In their minds, I was already gone. My life was just an estate waiting to be claimed. Whether I lived 70 more years or 70 more days didn't matter. I was no longer a person to them, just an aging wallet with a pulse that had become inconvenient. I pointed toward the door. "Out! All of you! Get out of my home!" Michael stood up, his face twisted into that same stubborn expression he wore as a child when denied a toy. "Mom, we can't just leave," he said. "We have responsibilities. The rent, the car, the credit card you co-signed. You can't just abandon us overnight." "I can't?" My voice rose for the first time, shaking the quiet walls. "Who says I can't? I've paid rent that wasn't mine. I've stocked a fridge in a house where I was unwelcome. I've kept a lifestyle afloat that had no room for me." Mr. Fisher calmly reached into his briefcase and laid a folder on the table. "Mrs. Parker, we've prepared some documents to make this transition easier. It's a simple power of attorney that allows your son and daughter-in-law to manage your finances until you're feeling better. Temporary, of course." I picked up the folder, felt the slick paper between my fingers, and tossed it straight into the trash. "The only transition happening here is yours to the front door." Hannah began to cry, not the kind of crying that comes from sorrow, but the kind that drips from anger and entitlement. "You can't do this to us, Margaret. We counted on you. We made plans because we trusted your help. We bought things. We built our future around your support." "Obligations built on my money," I answered. "Not on love, not on gratitude, just my money. And now that I've chosen to spend it on my own life, suddenly I'm the confused old woman who needs a guardian." Michael stepped toward me, and I moved back. The space between us had become a boundary I would never cross again. He was no longer the small boy who needed comfort. He was a grown man who saw his mother as an obstacle standing between him and an unearned life. "Mom," he began, his voice soft, rehearsed. "We made mistakes. The wedding, it was all a misunderstanding." Hannah was nervous. I was overwhelmed. "We can fix this if you just become reasonable again." Reasonable. The word burned like acid on my tongue. Being reasonable had meant paying their bills in silence. It meant smiling through rejection and pretending betrayal didn't cut me open. Reasonable was the leash they used to pull me back whenever I tried to stand up. I am done being reasonable, Mr. Fisher gathered his papers with mechanical efficiency, the way men do when a client refuses to surrender. Mrs. Parker, he said, this isn't over. Your family has legal options. If you continue making irrational financial choices, a judge can assign you a guardian. The words landed like a slap, sharp and echoing. This wasn't just emotional manipulation anymore. It was a threat, a plan already forming behind polite voices. I realized then that I wasn't just fighting for my independence. I was fighting for my right to exist as a sane, capable woman. It was the moment I understood that love, when tied to greed, becomes nothing more than control dressed as concern. They wanted to declare me incompetent to manage my own affairs. I looked straight at Mr. Fisher, refusing to blink. I suggest you check your facts before you threaten a 71-year-old woman who has handled her finances flawlessly for 40 years. I raised my son alone after my husband died, ran a household with dignity, and worked until the day I retired. Until last week, I supported 2 grown adults who could have managed without me. Hannah's tears stopped. She looked at me then, her face suddenly hard and unfamiliar. This isn't over, Margaret, she said. We have rights. We have lawyers, too. Perfect, I replied calmly. Hire as many as you like, but use your own money. Mine is no longer open to fund your tantrums. Her lips trembled, and Michael's expression twisted into something between rage and disbelief. They weren't used to being told no. They gathered their coats, wounded pride trailing behind them. The man in the gray suit closed his briefcase. As they reached the door, Michael turned and gave me one last look. Mom, he said darkly, this is going to end badly for you. You'll end up alone, with no one left to take care of you. I held his gaze. I am already alone, I said, my voice steady. The only difference is that now, it's by my choice, not by your neglect. When the door shut, the house seemed to exhale. The silence that filled it wasn't empty. It was pure, steady, alive. For the first time in years, quiet didn't feel like punishment. It felt like freedom. I stood in my living room, letting the stillness wrap around me like a blanket I had been denied for too long. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because of sadness, but because of the rush of something unfamiliar, adrenaline born from reclaiming control. I lay in bed, tracing plans in my mind like a strategist before a battle. If they wanted war, I would fight, but I would not use anger as my weapon. I would fight with intelligence, patience, and the truth. By dawn, I was already dressed. The sky was pale, the kind of gray that comes before renewal. I made myself a cup of coffee and headed out to meet the only lawyer I trusted. Mr. Weber's office smelled faintly of old books and lemon polish. I had met him years earlier when finalizing my husband's will. Unlike Fisher, Weber's reputation was impeccable. He listened without interrupting, as I told him everything, the confrontation, the threats, the papers. When I finished, he nodded gravely. Mrs. Parker, what your children attempted yesterday happens far more often than you'd imagine. It's called elder financial abuse, and it's a federal offense. The words calmed and unsettled me all at once. I wasn't imagining things, I wasn't losing my mind. But hearing it called a crime made the betrayal feel sharper, more real. They had broken into my home, handled my personal papers, and plotted to steal my autonomy. It wasn't just family drama, it was violation. Mr. Weber's pen moved across his notepad with quiet precision. We need to document everything, he said. Every transfer, every request for money, every time they cornered you. He asked me to bring statements, receipts, anything that proved the long trail of my generosity. We also need to revise your will, he added gently. You must protect your assets from any future attempts. I nodded, feeling both exposed and empowered. For 3 hours we worked side by side, reviewing every record. When he totaled the amount $33,400, he let out a low whistle. Mrs. Parker, he said, with this money you could have lived comfortably. You could have traveled, taken up painting again, maybe even fallen in love. Instead, you financed the lives of 2 adults who didn't even respect you enough to invite you to their wedding. His words stung, but they also set something inside me free. When I left his office, I wasn't just lighter, I was armed with a plan. First, I would change every lock in my house. Second, I would install security cameras, not for fear but for peace of mind. Third, I would open a new bank account somewhere Michael and Hannah couldn't reach. And finally, I would start living the life I'd delayed for decades. No more guilt. No more apologies for wanting to keep what was mine. My next stop was the hardware store. The familiar bell above the door jingled as I entered. The owner, Mr. Summers, had known me for years. He had seen me buy supplies for Michael's leaking faucet, for Hannah's broken shelf, for all their endless needs. He looked up from the counter, smiling warmly. "Mrs. Parker, what brings you here today? Another crisis at your son's place?" I smiled back, but this time it was different. "No, Mr. Summers. This time it's for me. I need new locks for my house and the best you've got." For once, I wasn't fixing someone else's mess. I was securing my own future. He looked surprised but asked no questions. While I compared locks, his son Ethan walked in, carrying boxes of equipment. He specialized in installing home security systems. It felt almost like fate intervening. "Ethan," I said, "I also want a full surveillance setup. Cameras, sensors, everything. The cost doesn't matter." He nodded, and within minutes, they scheduled the installation for the next morning. As they packed up, my phone rang again. The number was unfamiliar. I hesitated before answering. It was Hannah, calling from someone else's phone. "Margaret, please don't hang up. We need to talk like reasonable adults." I kept my voice flat. "Go ahead." She started with the familiar tone of false warmth. "I know you're hurt about the wedding. It was a mistake. Michael and I talked, and we want to make it up to you. How about a dinner at your place? We'll cook together, just like before." The manipulation was so transparent it almost amused me. "Hannah," I said slowly, "how many months behind are you on rent?" The silence that followed told me everything. After a pause, she stammered, 2 months. 1,000 total. But that's not why I'm calling. We miss you, Margaret. We miss having you in our lives." "Do you miss me or my money?" I asked. "Both," she admitted after a moment. Her honesty startled me for a second, but it didn't move me. "Yes, we need help, but we love you too," she added softly. "You're important to us." "Important," I repeated. "Then why wasn't I important enough to be at your wedding? Why wasn't I important enough for a call that wasn't about bills or favors? When was the last time you called to ask how I was feeling?" The silence stretched again. We both knew the answer: never. "Hannah, let me make this simple," I said. "For 3 years, you treated me like an ATM with emotions. You used me, dismissed me, and finally insulted me in the cruelest way. Now that the well has dried up, you suddenly remember love." "Margaret, please," she began, but I stopped her. "There is no please anymore. You made your choice when you decided I wasn't special enough for your wedding. Now, I'm making mine." I hung up and turned off the phone. I didn't want their voices infecting my day of freedom. The afternoon sun was bright, and the world felt strangely open. I drove to the beauty salon, a place I hadn't visited in over a year. Each time I'd tried, something came up: an emergency, a payment, another one of their needs. Today, I was done postponing myself. Cynthia, my favorite stylist, greeted me with delight. "Mrs. Parker, what a surprise," she said. "I thought you'd forgotten us." I smiled. "I didn't forget you, Cynthia. I just forgot that I deserve care too." I booked the full treatment cut: color, manicure, pedicure. As she worked, we talked about her children, her new garden, her plans for a vacation. It felt refreshing to have a conversation that wasn't about my son and his wife. When she finished, I looked in the mirror and saw someone I hadn't seen in years. My hair gleamed, my nails were neat, and my reflection carried a quiet strength. Cynthia smiled. "You look wonderful," she said. "But more than that, you look free. Did something good happen?" "Yes, Cynthia. Something very good. I finally learned to say no." As I drove home, a flicker of worry returned when I saw a car parked in front of my house. For a moment, I feared Michael and Hannah had come back with another plan. But as I got closer, I saw an elderly woman sitting on my porch steps, her hands folded in her lap. "Mrs. Parker," she called as I stepped out of the car. "Yes, that's me. Can I help you?" "I'm Eleanor Brooks, your neighbor. We've lived next door for years, but we've never properly met. Yesterday, I heard raised voices from your house and wanted to make sure you're all right." Her concern caught me off guard. A stranger cared more for my well-being than my own child. "Please, come in, Mrs. Brooks," I said. "I'll make some coffee." "There's a story you'll hardly believe." As the coffee brewed, I told her everything. Every humiliation, every betrayal, every small victory. She listened quietly, nodding now and then, her eyes kind and steady. When I finished, she reached across the table, her eyes glistening. "Mrs. Parker," she said softly, "you did the right thing." "I went through something similar with my daughter 5 years ago," Eleanor said softly. "I also believed it was my duty to keep her life afloat. I thought if I didn't help her financially, she wouldn't love me." "What happened?" I asked. "I stopped the money," she replied. "Once I realized she only called when she needed something, I ended it. The first months were terrible. She cried, begged, and guilted me, but half a year later she called to apologize. Now, we finally have a real relationship, built on affection, not on cash." Her words sank deep into me, a small light piercing the fog I'd been living in. "Do you think Michael and Hannah might understand one day?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But that's not your burden anymore, Mrs. Parker. Your responsibility now is to live for yourself." That night, I went to bed without worrying about whether they had paid rent or bought food. My thoughts were quiet, and mine alone. For the first time in years, I slept deeply. The next morning, right on time, Ethan and Mr. Summers arrived to install the locks and cameras. They moved efficiently, the sound of tools echoing through the house like a new rhythm of life. My phone lit up again and again with unfamiliar numbers. Hannah was still trying to reach me from different phones, but I had mastered a new skill ignoring calls that didn't serve my peace. "Mrs. Parker," Ethan said as he finished attaching a camera near the front door, "this system will give you complete control. You'll see who approaches your house in real time, and if anyone tries to enter without permission, the police are alerted instantly." I thanked him quietly. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was installing security to protect myself from my own child. But it didn't sting anymore. It just felt necessary, another form of boundary. When they finished, I made tea and stared out the window, feeling safe in a way I hadn't in years. The world outside was still the same, but my place in it had changed. I decided to do something I hadn't done in ages, call my sister Diana in Boston. We hadn't spoken much because every conversation used to revolve around Michael and Hannah. I'd brag about their lives, their new things, how proud I was to help them. I see now those calls were more like balance sheets than sisterly talks. Diana answered, her voice warm but surprised. "Margaret, it's been so long. How are you?" "I'm better than I've been in a long time," I said. "I called to tell you I've finally come to my senses." I told her everything about the secret wedding, the humiliation, the lawyer, the moment I decided to stop financing my own neglect. She listened in silence until I was done. Then her response caught me off guard. "Margaret, it was about time. Every time we talked, I could hear the sadness under your pride. You spoke about how much money you gave them as though love could be measured in dollars. I wanted to tell you to stop, but I didn't know how without hurting you." "What did you want to tell me?" I asked quietly. "That Michael never spoke warmly about you when I saw him at family events. He always said things like, 'My mom helped me buy this,' or 'My mom paid for that,' but never once, 'I miss my mom' or 'I love my mom.' You were a provider, not a parent in his eyes." Her words stung, but it was a necessary pain, the kind that cleans a wound so it can finally heal. Then she added something that chilled me to my core. "You know what else I noticed, Margaret? Hannah always talked about you in the future tense. When your mother's gone, we'll remodel her place. When we inherit, we'll invest in the business. As if they were waiting for you to disappear so they could start living. It felt like a gust of cold air passed through me. They didn't just see me as a source of money. They saw me as a temporary obstacle between themselves and their imagined future. I sat in my kitchen long after our call ended, the silence heavier but clearer. I thought of my husband, the man who loved me without conditions, gone for decades now. I thought of the years I spent raising my son alone, working, saving, dreaming of the day he would stand on his own. And I thought of the last 3 years, when I had poured my heart and $33,000 into 2 people who saw me, not as a mother but as a check waiting to clear. The doorbell rang, and on the screen of my new security system, I saw Eleanor standing on my porch with a steaming mug in her hands. I opened the door, and she handed it to me with that gentle smile I had grown to admire. "I thought you might need some company after everything we talked about," she said. We sat together in the living room, sunlight pouring through the window as she began to share more of her own story. "My daughter used to say the same things to me that Hannah says to you," she began. "You're like a second mother. We're special to you. Everything you have will be ours one day anyway." Those are lines from the same script, Mrs. Parker. They all use it. "Do you think such a script really exists?" I asked with a half smile. "Not officially," she replied, "but it seems every manipulative child has read the same book. Chapter 1, make her feel needed. Chapter 2, create endless emergencies. Chapter 3, when she resists, question her sanity." We laughed, but the sound carried more sadness than humor. It was both tragic and strangely comforting to realize how predictable our stories had become. "Did you ever feel guilty for cutting her off?" I asked. "Every single day for the first 3 months," she said honestly. "But then I started seeing results. My daughter found another job. Her husband gave up golf and started working weekends. They began to live within their means. And more importantly, they remembered that I was a person, not a resource." Her words stayed with me long after she left. That afternoon, I decided to do something I had been avoiding for far too long: visit my husband's grave. I used to make excuses. There was always something Michael or Hannah needed, always another transfer, another emergency. The cemetery was quiet when I arrived, a peaceful corner of the world I had ignored for too long. The grass had grown high, and the flowers had faded. I knelt beside Robert's headstone, brushing away leaves, and whispered as if he could hear me. "Robert, my love, I think I lost myself after you passed. I poured everything into raising our son, trying to be the perfect mother. I wanted to fill both our roles, but somewhere along the way, I stopped being myself." The wind stirred the branches above, and for a moment, I felt his presence, calm and steady. "Our boy has changed," I murmured. "Or maybe he was always this way and I refused to see it. His wife is just as you'd expect, demanding, charming when she wants something. The money you left me to live in peace, I spent on them. But not anymore, my love. I've learned." I cleaned the grave, replaced the wilted flowers with new ones, and stayed there for an hour, simply breathing. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing to fix anyone else's life. When I drove home, the sight waiting for me made my stomach tighten. 3 cars lined the curb in front of my house. My heart quickened, but this time I didn't panic. I checked the cameras. Michael, Hannah, and 2 strangers stood in my yard, gesturing wildly. I stayed in my car and called Mr. Weber. "Mr. Weber, they're here again, and they've brought others." "What should I do?" I asked. "Stay in your car, Mrs. Parker," he said firmly. "I'm on my way and I'll alert the police." After our talk yesterday, I filed for a temporary restraining order. They have no right to be on your property. Minutes later, 2 patrol cars and Mr. Weber's sedan pulled up. From the driver's seat, I watched the officers approach my son and his wife. Michael waved his arms, his face red. Hannah cried again, her performance unchanged. But this time her tears meant nothing to me. One of the officers came to my car window. "Ma'am, it's safe to step out. Your visitors are leaving." I opened the door, the cool air brushing against my face. From the sidewalk, Michael shouted, "Mom, this is insane. We're your family. You can't call the police on your own son." I looked at him, my voice calm but firm. Family doesn't threaten lawsuits over mental incompetence. Family doesn't break into someone's home without permission. Family doesn't treat their mother like a walking bank. Hannah's voice cut through the air from across the street, shrill and furious. "You'll pay us back everything you owe," she shouted. "You co-signed our loans. You can't just walk away." Before I could answer, Mr. Weber stepped forward, his tone sharp and professional. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, "any future communication must go through my office. I advise you to speak with your own attorney before making any more demands. My client has complete documentation, proving that every payment was voluntary and given over 3 years." Hannah froze, her face twisting with defeat. I watched them climb into their cars, their anger spilling into motion. As they drove away, I knew the storm wasn't truly over, but I no longer felt helpless. I had allies now, my lawyer, my neighbor, and my own steady mind. That night, Eleanor invited me to dinner. Her kitchen was warm, smelling of baked bread and something sweet. Her daughter was visiting, and I watched them move around each other with an ease I hadn't seen in years. They talked about small things, about work, about recipes, about life. Not once did the daughter ask for money or make her mother feel guilty for aging. I found myself smiling, almost wistfully. I wanted that too. I wanted to sit across from my son and hear genuine laughter, not rehearsed gratitude. When the evening quieted, I turned to Eleanor. "I wanted that with Michael," I said softly. "Maybe you'll have it someday," she answered. "But first, he has to learn that you're a person who deserves respect, not an endless supply of help." Her words lingered like a gentle truth. For the first time in weeks, I went to bed hopeful. The next few days passed in calm silence. My cameras showed Michael and Hannah driving by several times each day, their car slowing in front of my house, sometimes stopping for a few minutes. They never got out. It was as if they were studying me, waiting for a weakness to appear. Mr. Weber had told me to keep a detailed log of each visit. Their persistence, he had explained, would only strengthen my case. By Friday morning, the house felt peaceful. I made myself breakfast, the light spilling across the table, and for once, I didn't feel like I was living in someone else's story. Then the doorbell rang. The cameras showed a young woman, professionally dressed, holding a folder and wearing a polite smile. I didn't recognize her. Something about the way she stood told me it wasn't a social call. "Good morning, Mrs. Parker," she said as I opened the door. "I'm a social investigator from the Department of Senior Services. We've received a report that you may be at risk, and I'm here to perform a wellness check." My stomach tightened. They had escalated again. It wasn't enough to threaten me with lawyers. They had gone to the government. "May I see your identification?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Of course," she replied, showing me a badge that looked legitimate. "My name is Mrs. Smith. I'm a caseworker. May I come inside to speak with you?" I knew refusing would look worse, so I stepped aside and gestured toward the living room. She sat gracefully, pulling a form from her folder. "Mrs. Parker," she began, "we've received several reports describing concerning changes in your behavior. It says here you've withdrawn from your family, abruptly altered your financial habits, and installed unnecessary surveillance equipment. It also mentions you've refused medical and legal assistance offered by loved ones." Every sentence was crafted to sound like a symptom. I could almost hear Hannah's voice behind the words, calm and persuasive. This was her work, clever, polished, manipulative. She was trying to paint me as unstable. I folded my hands in my lap, straightened my back, and met the social worker's gaze. "Mrs. Smith," I said, summoning every ounce of dignity I had left. "I would like to call my lawyer before answering any questions." The woman smiled politely, but her eyes stayed sharp. "Ma'am, this isn't a legal interrogation," she said. "It's a simple wellness check. If you have nothing to hide, there's no reason not to cooperate." The phrase made my blood boil. That was always the weapon of manipulators. If you're innocent, you shouldn't mind being violated. I kept my composure. "Miss, I'm calling my attorney. You may wait or return later, but I won't speak without representation." Mr. Weber arrived within 20 minutes, his expression darkening as soon as he saw the social worker. "Miss Smith," he said after glancing at her badge, "I trust you have a court order to be here. My client is under legal protection, and any unauthorized questioning borders on harassment." Mrs. Smith hesitated. "We've received reports from concerned relatives about her welfare," she said, her voice less steady than before. "What relatives?" Mr. Weber asked. "The same people who tried to trick her into signing over her finances, the same ones who entered her home without permission and rummaged through her documents, the same family who lived on her money while excluding her from their lives." He opened his briefcase and laid a folder on the table. "Here is full documentation of my client's case, financial exploitation totaling $33,400 in years of emotional coercion." Mrs. Smith's eyes moved over the papers. With each page, her confidence faded. Clearly, the story she'd been given didn't match the truth in front of her. After a moment, she looked up. "Mrs. Parker, can you explain why you suddenly stopped providing financial assistance to your son?" Because I finally understood what was happening, I said. I realized they weren't family in spirit, only in title. To them, I was never a mother, just an open account. She adjusted her glasses. But don't you think it's still your duty to help your family? The question struck me like an insult. Miss Smith, my duty as a parent was to raise my child, to feed him, teach him, and guide him until he could stand alone. My son is 35, married, healthy, and capable of earning a living. Supporting him now is not my obligation. It was a choice, and I've chosen differently. Mr. Weber leaned forward. Tell me, Miss Smith, do you consider it normal for a grown man in his 30s to depend on his 71-year-old mother for rent money? She didn't answer right away. Her pen hovered over her notes, then fell still. The silence spoke louder than any words. Finally, she asked quietly, Mrs. Parker, do you manage all of your finances personally? Yes, I said. I can show you everything. Bank records, investments, taxes, all current, all accurate. And you live independently? As you can see, I keep my home clean. I cook for myself. I drive, and I maintain friendships. I am not isolated or frail. Do you take any regular medication? She asked. Just vitamins and the occasional aspirin. No prescriptions, no mental health concerns. Mr. Weber added firmly, my client recently underwent full medical evaluation. Her doctor confirmed she is in excellent mental and physical condition. Mrs. Wetters, Smith gathered her papers, closing the folder with a sigh. Mrs. Parker, based on what I've reviewed and witnessed, there is no evidence that you are at risk or require intervention. I will be closing this case. When she left, the room fell quiet. The ticking of the clock filled the silence between us. Finally, Mr. Weber spoke. Margaret, this won't be the last of it. They're desperate now, spending money they don't have, hiring anyone who will listen, trying to prove you're unfit. Does that mean they're running out of options? I asked. Exactly, he said. And when people like that get desperate, they turn to the only weapon left, a lawsuit for incompetence. It was expensive and difficult to win, Mr. Weber said, but if they managed to find a sympathetic judge and a willing psychiatrist, they could convince the court to appoint a guardian. The thought chilled me. The idea that someone could legally take control of my life and my money felt like a nightmare that refused to end. They could try, he continued, but we have clear evidence that you are mentally sound and that their motives are greed, not concern. That afternoon, I called my sister Diana to let out the storm in my chest. After hearing everything, she sighed. Do you see how far they are willing to go for money? She said. They are willing to destroy relationships, spend money they do not have, even damage their reputation, all to get their hands on your accounts again. Her words struck deep. She was right. Michael and Hannah had shown me exactly who they were. There was no room left for doubt, no chance for reconciliation. They had never seen me as a mother or as family. I was simply a balance sheet that happened to breathe. The realization hurt, but it also set me free. I no longer felt guilty for defending myself. I no longer questioned whether I was doing the right thing. That evening, Eleanor arrived with a surprise. She had brought her friends from the garden club to meet me. Margaret, she said warmly, these are my friends Cynthia, who you already know from the salon, Maria, Carmen, and Alfreda. Every one of them had faced something similar. We sat in my living room sharing stories, the air filled with a strange mix of laughter and quiet understanding. Maria spoke about the brother who always borrowed money and never paid it back. Carmen talked about the daughter who only appeared when she needed help. Alfreda, the oldest, told us how she had rewritten her will after realizing her grandchildren had turned her future into their retirement plan. When it was my turn, I said softly, what hurts most is not losing the money but realizing the love I thought I had never truly existed. Alfreda looked at me with kind eyes. My dear, true love cannot be bought, she said gently. If you had to pay for it, it was never real. Her words were like medicine for a wound I had been ignoring. She was right. I had spent years buying attention, not affection. I had confused obligation with love. And now that the illusion had shattered, I could finally breathe. You know what I've learned, I told them. Being surrounded by people who do not love you is far lonelier than being by yourself. At least now, when I am alone, I am in good company. Everyone laughed, and we raised our glasses to our new clarity. When they left, I stayed in the garden, watching the stars shimmer through the leaves. They seemed brighter that night, or maybe it was just that my eyes were finally clear. For the first time in decades, I was completely independent. No one depended on me. No one drained me. My money, my time, my life finally mine again. And instead of fear, I felt a spark of excitement. I could travel wherever I pleased. I could renovate my house, buy myself something beautiful, donate to causes I truly cared about. I could invest in my own joy instead of financing someone else's comfort. Freedom, I realized, had a taste. It was sharp, clean, and filled with hope. For the first time in years, I wanted to plan my future. A month passed after the social worker's visit. I believed I had finally won. My life had settled into a calm rhythm. I took breakfast while reading the newspaper, tended my garden, had lunch with Eleanor or one of my new friends. In the afternoons, I painted again, something I had not done since becoming Michael and Hannah's full-time benefactor. But one Thursday morning, as I stood before my easel, brushing soft strokes of color across the canvas, I heard a knock at the door. Mr. Weber stood there, his expression heavy. The air in the room seemed to drop a few degrees. "Margaret," he said, "we need to talk. Michael and Hannah have filed a formal lawsuit in family court to declare you mentally incompetent. They are requesting to have a legal guardian assigned to you." The words fell on me like stones, heavy and cold. I had feared it, but hearing them spoken aloud made it real in a way I wasn't ready for. "Does that mean they can take my money?" I asked quietly. Mr. Weber hesitated. "If a judge rules you incapable of managing your affairs, yes, your son could be appointed guardian with full access to your finances." I sank into the sofa, the air thick with disbelief. My own child was trying to strip me of my dignity under the disguise of legal concern. My son wanted to declare me incompetent to steal what I had worked for all my life. "Mr. Weber, what could they possibly use against me? You know I am of sound mind." "They have 3 sworn statements," he said grimly, "claiming you've been acting erratically." He continued, "They've also submitted unpaid medical bills supposedly under your name and records suggesting you've been hoarding medication." "But that's a complete lie," I said. "I don't have any unpaid bills. I take only vitamins." Mr. Weber nodded. "I know, but they fabricated the evidence well. They even have a statement from Dr. Lehman saying you refused a psychiatric evaluation, which they interpret as proof of cognitive decline. It was diabolical. They had twisted my refusal to submit to unnecessary scrutiny into evidence of mental illness. My caution had become their weapon. "Who are the witnesses?" I asked. Mr. Weber shuffled through his folder. "Hannah, of course, a neighbor named Mr. Davis, and your pharmacist, Mr. Green." My stomach turned. Mr. Davis, the man across the street, who constantly complained about parking, and Mr. Green, the pharmacist who had always been polite. "Something wasn't right," I said. "I need to talk to Mr. Green." That afternoon we drove to the pharmacy together. Mr. Green looked startled when he saw me. "Mrs. Parker," he said nervously, "how are you?" "I've been better," I replied. "I was told you signed a document stating I mishandle my medications." His face flushed crimson. "Mrs. Parker, your daughter-in-law came in a few weeks ago. She said she was worried about your behavior and asked about your prescriptions." "And what did you tell her?" "I told her you only buy vitamins and sometimes aspirin, no regular medications. But she said that was proof you weren't caring for yourself properly." Mr. Weber stepped in. "Did you sign anything, Mr. Green?" He sighed. "She brought a paper, said it was for insurance. It stated that your purchases were irregular. I signed it without reading closely. I didn't realize it was for court." I felt my pulse pounding in my ears. My own pharmacist had been manipulated into betraying me. Hannah's deceit knew no bounds. "Mr. Green, please write a new statement explaining exactly what happened and confirming I have no medication issues." He nodded quickly. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Parker. I'll fix this right away." After the pharmacy, we went to see Mr. Davis. When he opened the door, his face was tight with suspicion. "What do you want?" he barked. Mr. Weber spoke calmly. "I understand you signed a declaration about my client's behavior." "I sure did," he said proudly. "That woman's been losing it for weeks, acting paranoid. Installing cameras everywhere, letting strangers in, yelling at people in the street." I bit back my anger. Everything he said had been twisted beyond recognition. The cameras were for safety. The strangers were my friends. The yelling was me defending my home. Mr. Davis, do you know why I installed those cameras? He snorted. No, and I don't care. I looked him square in the eye. To protect myself from my son and daughter-in-law, who broke into my home without permission and threatened me. That is what a crazy person would say, he muttered with a sneer. There was no point trying to reason with him. His words came from ignorance and spite, a shallow judgment twisted by gossip. That evening, Mr. Weber and I sat down in his office to plan my defense. Margaret, we need an independent psychiatric evaluation, he said firmly. I know a specialist, Dr. Moore. She can provide an official report confirming your full competence. But what if Michael and Hannah have already bribed the judge? I asked. What if none of this matters because they have decided the outcome before it begins? Mr. Weber looked at me steadily. The system is flawed, he said, but not hopeless. We have proof of your stability and evidence of their greed. We will fight this, Margaret, and we will win. The next morning, I met Dr. Moore. She was in her 50s, with calm eyes that seemed to see straight through pretenses. Mrs. Parker, I'll be asking you several questions to evaluate your mental and cognitive state. Take your time. For 2 full hours, she tested everything: memory, reasoning, problem-solving, even emotional awareness. She asked me to recall numbers, explain financial decisions, and interpret proverbs. When it was over, she smiled. Mrs. Parker, your results are exceptional for your age. You show excellent cognitive function and strong emotional balance. There are no signs of impairment whatsoever. Doctor, I asked softly, why would my family do this to me? She sighed. Based on your account and the documents I reviewed, this is a textbook case of elder financial exploitation. Sadly, it happens more often than people realize. Leaving her office, I felt both vindicated and heavy-hearted. The validation was comforting, but it underscored how real and dangerous the situation had become. That afternoon, Eleanor gathered the garden club at her house. When I told them about the incompetence lawsuit, the room erupted in outrage. Margaret, Maria said, we'll testify for you. We've seen how clear-minded and independent you are. Better than clear, Cynthia chimed in. You're sharper than most women half your age. Alfreda, her 80 years etched in kindness, took my hands. My dear, she said, what your children are doing isn't new. Throughout history, greedy heirs have tried to brand their parents insane for money. But you have what they never did: documentation, legal counsel, and witnesses who believe in you. Her words wrapped around me like a shield. I wasn't alone. I had allies who had watched my strength grow. Still, a quiet sorrow lingered. You know what hurts the most, I said. It's not just that they want my money, it's that they're willing to destroy any hope of reconciliation for it. Even if I wanted to forgive them, how could I after this? Maybe it's for the best, Cynthia replied gently. Now you see them clearly, and you can live without the illusion. That night, I finally cried, not from despair, but from release. I wept for the son I had lost to greed, for the mother I had tried so hard to be, for the love that turned out to be conditional. But beneath the tears was something fierce, a new resolve. They could try to take my money, but they would never take my dignity. The battle had officially begun, and I was ready for it. 3 weeks later, the day of the trial arrived. I woke early, put on my best black suit, and stood before the mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't afraid anymore. Today wasn't just about my mind. It was about my worth, my independence, my right to live without fear. Mr. Weber arrived at 7 sharp. Margaret, remember this, he said. The burden of proof lies with them. They must prove you're incompetent. We only need to show that you're not. And what if the judge has already chosen a side? I asked. He shook his head. Judge Miller is fair, Margaret. I checked his record. He's known for protecting the elderly, not exploiting them. He'll see the truth. We arrived at the courthouse at 9 in the morning. In the hallway, I saw Michael in a brand new suit he probably bought just for the occasion, and Hannah dressed in black as if she were attending a funeral. Perhaps she was the funeral of whatever bond once tied us together. When our eyes met, my son looked away, but Hannah stared at me, her expression cold and transactional, as if this were nothing more than business. Their attorney was an older man, sharp and composed, with the calm arrogance of someone who had won too many similar cases. As he began his opening statement, I saw his strategy unfold. He would paint me as a confused old woman led astray by manipulative outsiders. "Your Honor," he began, "Mrs. Parker has demonstrated troubling cognitive decline in recent months." He continued, claiming I had irrationally cut off financial support for my family, installed unnecessary security measures out of paranoia, and fallen under the influence of neighbors and lawyers who had isolated me from those who loved me. Each phrase was perfectly crafted to turn my independence into instability, my self-protection into delusion, and my freedom into proof of manipulation. Then came their witnesses. Hannah was first, performing her role with tearful precision. She wept as she spoke of my supposed hostility, my isolation, my paranoia. "Your Honor," she said with a trembling voice, "Margaret has always been like a second mother to me. Watching her mental decline has been heartbreaking. We just want to help her." Her false sincerity made my stomach turn. But when Mr. Weber began his cross-examination, her act started to unravel. "Mrs. Sutton," he asked calmly, "when was the last time you called my client without asking for money?" Hannah hesitated. "Well, we always talked about many things. Can you name a single date?" "I can't remember exact dates. Is it true that you and your husband got married without inviting my client?" "It was a small ceremony," she said. "Is it also true that when she asked about it, you told her that only special people were invited?" Her face flushed. Those words were taken out of context. "Mr. Weber pressed gently. "And what context would make those words acceptable to say to your mother-in-law?" Hannah's silence was her answer. Then it was Michael's turn. Watching my son take the stand, swear to tell the truth, and prepare to lie about my mind was one of the most painful moments of my life. This was the boy I had carried, raised, and sacrificed everything for. "My mother has always been generous," he began, "but lately, she's been acting irrationally. We believe she's being influenced by people who want her money." Mr. Weber approached the bench, his tone measured. "Mr. Parker, how much money have you received from your mother in the past 3 years?" "I don't know exactly." "Would $33,400 sound about right?" Michael swallowed. "Maybe. She's always helped us." "And how many times, Mr. Parker? Have you visited your mother without asking her for money?" The silence that followed was deafening. "Is it also true that you and your wife entered her house without permission and went through her private papers? We were concerned for her safety." "And is it true that you brought a lawyer to her home to pressure her into signing over power of attorney? We were only trying to help her manage her finances." His excuses hung in the air like smoke, thin and choking. Each answer stripped away another layer of their deception. Sitting there in that courtroom, I realized this was more than a legal battle. It was a reckoning, a public unveiling of the truth they had tried so hard to bury. "Do you, at 35 years old, still need your 71-year-old mother to pay your rent?" Michael froze, his face stripped of every trace of confidence. The silence that followed said everything words could not. Then came Mr. Davis, who testified about my supposed erratic behavior, but under questioning from Mr. Weber, admitted he had never spoken to me directly. His entire testimony was built on gossip and assumptions. Dr. Lehman took the stand next, claiming that my refusal to undergo a psychiatric exam was proof of mental decline. Mr. Weber calmly presented Dr. Moore's report, showing I had already been evaluated and that my cognitive results were excellent. The contrast was devastating to their argument. Then came our witnesses. Mr. Green, my pharmacist, testified first, explaining how he had been deceived into signing a statement that distorted my medication record. His regret was genuine. Dr. Moore followed, presenting my flawless test scores and confirming my exceptional clarity of thought. Even Mr. Summers, the hardware store owner, described me as rational and deliberate, explaining that my financial choices had been careful and responsible. Eleanor and the ladies from the garden club testified next. They spoke of my independence, my energy, and how I had built a healthy social circle free from manipulation. Their words painted a picture that no lawyer could twist. Finally, it was my turn to take the stand. I rose slowly, carrying the weight of 7 decades of life, wisdom, and resilience. Mr. Weber guided me gently, letting me tell my story in my own voice. I spoke of the $33,400 spent over 3 years. I described the humiliation of being excluded from my son's wedding, the emotional blackmail, the invasion of my privacy, the legal threats. When he asked why I had stopped supporting them, my answer came from deep within. Because I finally realized what I was getting was not love, I said clearly. It was a transaction dressed up as family affection. My money was wanted, but my presence was not. "Do you regret your decision?" he asked. "Only that it took me so long to make it," I replied. Michael's lawyer tried to rattle me during cross-examination, but I answered every question calmly. When he implied that I had been influenced by new friends, I reminded him that genuine relationships are built on respect, not on bank transfers. His words lost their power in the face of simple truth. In his closing argument, their lawyer repeated that I was being manipulated. Mr. Weber's rebuttal was firm and devastating. "What we have seen here, Your Honor, is not confusion, but courage, the courage of a woman reclaiming her freedom after years of financial and emotional exploitation. The plaintiffs have offered no credible medical proof, only frustration that their funding has ended." Judge Miller left to deliberate. The 2 hours that followed stretched into an eternity. When he finally returned, his expression was solemn yet steady. After reviewing all the evidence, he said, "This court finds that Mrs. Parker is fully competent. Psychiatric evaluations confirm her mental clarity, and her financial choices, though painful to her family, are entirely rational and within her legal rights." My heart began to pound. "Furthermore," the judge said, "the evidence makes it clear that this case was driven by greed, not genuine concern for Mrs. Parker's well-being. The petition for guardianship is hereby denied." I had won. I hadn't just won the case. I had reclaimed my freedom, my dignity, and the right to live without fear or manipulation from those who claimed to love me. As we left the courthouse, I saw Michael and Hannah arguing bitterly with their lawyer. Hannah shot me a look of pure hatred before turning away. Michael hesitated for a moment, meeting my eyes with something that almost looked like regret, but it was far too late. That night, Eleanor gathered everyone at my home to celebrate. We raised our glasses to justice, to freedom, and to the bond between women who refused to be broken. "Margaret," Elfrida said, "today you didn't just win a case, you won back your life." She was right. For the first time in years, my future belonged entirely to me. I could travel, I could create, I could wake up each day without guilt or fear or anyone taking advantage of my kindness. 3 months later, I sold my house and moved into a cozy apartment near the heart of the city. I donated half of my savings to organizations that protect older adults from family exploitation. With the rest, I began truly living. I took art classes, traveled through Europe, and volunteered with others who had once been silenced by family greed. I never heard from Michael or Hannah again. People said they had moved into a smaller apartment and that Hannah had started working for the first time in years. Maybe hardship would teach them what my generosity never did, the worth of independence and self-respect. Some evenings, I stand on my balcony watching the stars, thinking about the woman I used to be, frightened, dependent, desperate to buy affection. That woman no longer exists. In her place stands someone who finally understands a simple truth. Real love cannot be bought, and freedom is always worth its cost. My name is Margaret. I am 72 years old, and I have learned the most important lesson of my life, that the first person I must love, protect, and honor is myself. And you, what would you do if this were your story? I would love to know your thoughts. Share them in the comments below. Tell me where you heard this story. For more true stories like this, stay with me for the next one. With warm regards, until next time.